a new piece in which the author reflects bitterly on Richard Branson. The NHS was attacked by ransomware. Turns out the whole NHS has been running on Windows XP, which means that quite a few people will have been told that they have cancer by a helpful paperclip. It was the biggest disaster to hit the NHS since records began, earlier this year. Some people got stuck in MRI scanners, which made me resolve never to have one again. I am less scared of developing a brain tumour which will pop my eyeballs into my bolognese than I am of getting trapped in a whirring coffin of broken tech. And yet I think the whole thing provided us with a useful metaphor for where the NHS is at. The hackers made the mistake of asking for a substantial amount of Bitcoin. Putting aside the fact that it's asking a lot of people who haven't upgraded from Windows XP to know what Bitcoin is, if they'd asked instead for a tiny amount of cash, a lot of people would have just paid it to get on with their day, and so many terminals were affected, they would have been rich. The people who will actually destroy the NHS are smarter than that, and we wearily allow a chiselling away by commercial forces who care about it no more than those hackers, to the enrichment of speculators like Virgin Care. Richard Branson is a man of contradictions. He paints himself as a hippie, and yet there are tannoy announcements in the aluminium mines of North Korea that mention their leader less than Virgin Radio. He talks in the language of social responsibility, and yet his tax affairs are such a complicated labyrinth, I wouldn't be surprised if his loose change was guarded by a minotaur. He flaunts his environmental credentials while running an airline, all skin, wrinkle and hair, like a piece of pork crackling that has been rejected during routine quality control. He likes to travel around the world in a balloon and blast into space, chasing the sense of nail-biting peril most of us get simply by trying to download a HD movie using Virgin Broadband. Not that Virgin Broadband and Virgin Phones don't have their upside. They're both so crap it's virtually impossible to go online and book a ticket for a Virgin train. He thinks not wearing a tie is a political statement. It's not a hijab, mate. We're not all stunned at the brave liberation of your floppy old gullet bursting forth like a flesh snood. His philosophy, such as it is, seems to rest on some Instagram quote version of meritocracy. No, Branson, not everyone can be who they want. You didn't start off with nothing. You started off with an aristocratic family, a private education, and a face whiter than a typed-out list of East Coast trains that arrived on time this year. Branson is part of an increasingly crowded pantheon of British greed and cynicism that we are inexplicably expected to admire. I suppose the more egregious example is Sir Philip Green. It's easier to grasp Green's innovative BHS business logic if you imagine him as a farmer. Right, I've got this cow, so there's two options: feed it so I can get milk from it indefinitely, or I do the smart thing and just keep stories of its good health circulating until I chop off all the horns, meat and hooves and give them to my wife. So what is the future for the NHS? It seems increasingly likely that its privatisation might be part of any US trade deal we sign up to post-Brexit. With the cost of health insurance, instead of 2 weeks getting fingered by a waiter in Faliraki, you'll have to save up to treat yourself to cancer. If you can't afford a transplant, you'll either have to get yourself a kidney out of the Tesco value range or hope to find a dented one that's been reduced. I don't think there's any question in government about whether the NHS can be privatised. It's just a question of how quickly it can be achieved without some kind of revolt. Our commentariat are doing their best to assist. There's a lot of talk of ageing populations and demographic realities. The truth is, the NHS could be saved very simply by making it the beneficiary of a financial transactions tax. In a saner society, its funding might simply be prioritised over military spending. Looked at in parliamentary terms, saving the NHS is actually a hard left position. The rest of the British political establishment see it as a piñata that will shower them with directorships and donations. I almost feel glad for these parasites that they cannot, by definition, feel shame.